hold one please?
So it's going to be the little arrow in the middle, and once you do that, you'll actually just pick PowerPoint window, and you should be good. We're good. Welcome to March 2nd, March 3rd. Can't keep track of the day, Tuesday. Finance Committee meeting, official roll call. Dan DeArmond.
Here.
Dan DeLong. Reed Needles. And Rodney Phillips.
Here.
All right, staff joining us today, Mr. Staschiak. Mayor Mariarn. And Mr. Cow. Thanks for being here with us. We are going to kind of jump around a little bit on the items of the agenda. Just Mr. Brossart is joining us, but he's going to be just a minute as he walks in the door. So while we are waiting on him to kind of sit and get situated and gather his thoughts, I just wanted to make a couple of changes to today's agenda. We had new business along with new items, which would be duplication. So I went ahead and crossed off new business from the agenda. We did not have any requests for community comment submitted in writing. So I'm going to go ahead and cross that off the agenda. We won't have to go through that today either. So we've got a little bit of a shortened schedule until we get to the end of it, and we'll see where that goes. While we are taking a second, we discussed cannabis tax in the last city council meeting that was put on this agenda before that meeting. Did anybody on this committee feel we needed to reapproach the conversation on keeping the cannabis tax in the general fund?
I was good with leaving it in the general fund.
Okay. It sounded like we all were, and I think that's why it didn't get moved here. So I'm going to go ahead and just say that that one is done on our agenda items as well. Mr. Needles, how are you, sir? Good. All right. And Mr. Brossart, are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm late. I guess. So we've got a brief presentation just to walk through. I know there's a lot of new folks on council, and sometimes when you hear municipal advisor, people are like, "What in the world is that?" And what do you guys do for the city? So we wanted to just walk through that, real quick, and then touch on some stuff with the debt for the city, and then give you a quick snapshot on where it's at. So feel free to jump in and ask questions where you like. You guys don't mind, I'm gonna stand. So I can sit and you go. Up here, see it. Great.
You want
I think
controller?
no, you can go ahead. I'll just say, on the next one. So again, we're gonna go over a municipal advisor role. Just real quick summary of your outstanding debt, where your credit ratings are at, and they'll give you a quick update on the bond market, which changed a lot today already. Given what's happening.
I know, but I unshared it and shared it again. So
Okay. You want me to step in, or
yeah,
you want
you take control, man.
So it's not sharing, you're saying?
Right now, there's a black screen. Black screen is a live stream, but your voices are coming through.
You know, it's showing you.
Where is there?
The camera, you're not sharing.
So right now, it doesn't show anything, but
It was showing us and then it.
okay. I have no excusable reason why that would be happening. It's
Try-
working as a.
Stop share and then try the whole screen
Okay.
again.
Yeah, you're right.
Let's just try that real quick. Yeah.
Now we should be good to go. Yeah. All right, sorry about that.
Thank you. All right, very good.
All right, so we're gonna hit the municipal advisor role. A little bit of background, just first on myself. I've been in the business about 27, 28 years. You go to the next one. I was previously with a firm, seasoned good mayor, they don't exist anymore, and then Fifth Third. But Ohio used to be predominantly what they called sort of an underwriter state. There wasn't a whole lot of municipal advisors around. There were very few. Probably the larger
issuers in the state of Ohio use them more often than the local governments. I don't remember how long the city's actually had a municipal advisor around. I know Brad's probably lived here for a long time. I think you guys might have been the abnormality towards this, but what happened back in 2008, 9, 10 with the fiscal crisis, a lot of municipal bond deals blew up, some complex ones. And the SEC came in and said, look, we don't like the banker giving the advice and also getting to the finish line where the big paydays at. And so they said, we really want to try to split the role here between the two. They didn't make it illegal for you to do both. Whenever municipality does an issue, the underwriter sends what they call G17 letter. It's an interesting letter to read. It's one of the reasons why I got out of that side of the business and on the municipal advisory side, because it says a couple things, mainly three things. That the banker is working for their own account during a sale. So when they're pricing your bonds, they're going to be more worried about their balance sheet than they are about, pricing competitively. That they really, the best interest is not really on your side. And then the last thing is that you probably want to get a municipal advisor. When I just sent that out for the first time, I thought, this is not me. I didn't get over on the other side. And so back in 2017, joined up with John Payne, who had his own firm for a while. And then we have gone from just two of us now up to 13 in a short time frame. So but that's a little bit about us and sort of who our firm is and where I've come from. So again, in terms of what our role here is, obviously they have forced us to I don't say forced, but legally we have a duty for the SEC and the federal government to have a fiduciary interest, duty to you all. When you look at some of the core responsibilities here, these are some of the things that we're involved with, and the debt issuance and structuring. I would tell you that we don't really care whether it's a bond, a loan, a private placement, whatever. Our role is to make sure that it's the best option for you and whatever you're trying to get accomplished. And then finding the right group to do that, because not everybody is good at selling maybe a $5 million or $10 million deal in the state of Ohio. There might be others compared to some of the big Wall Street firms. Then we work with you in terms of the method of sale, and one is a competitive bid and the other one is negotiated. I don't know what the city has done in the past, but the way that works is really it kind of depends upon what's going on in the market, what we see in terms of what is the best option given money inflow, and if there's a lot of buyers in the market, and if there's not a lot of buyers in the market, then maybe we decide, hey, we want to work with an underwriter and make sure that you're going to have an execution at the day of sale. But that's something that we worry about as we get closer when you actually have a financing in place. Again, on that market analysis and timing, when you think of this, we're having this discussion often lately with clients who are going through and doing financing of projects. Is it the right time to go to bonds right away and lock in 30-year interest rates, or is it a good time through a construction project to do a short-term borrowing, like a one-year note? And so that's sort of the market analysis and timing to really see what's happening. Back when in 2020 when rates were 30-year paper at 2%, we were begging people to lock in rates as fast as they could. Some listened, some didn't. Some got a nasty surprise by a chart I'll show you later, the year after that. Credit rating support. You have a credit rating. We're going to share that with you here in a second. It's a very good credit rating. We help with you through that process and to monitor that and sort of make sure your best practices are in place to keep that credit rating where it's at as well. Then the regulatory compliance side as well. Post-issuance compliance. This is a big thing with the SEC right now in the market in terms of the timeliness of fiscal statements that are posted to the market, so they can see how well you're doing, and then also arbitrage calculations. And you haven't dealt with that lately, but the IRS really does not like tax-exempt bonds, especially when you borrow a tax-exempt rate and you reinvest at a higher rate and make money off of it. They call that bad arbitrage, and so they're really focusing on that currently and the arbitrage calculation mode. And then just really long-term financial planning. You'll hear me say it over and over again. You never want to look at anything in a silo. And if you're not looking out 10 years, you need to be with your debt plan and your capital plan because, it may make sense to utilize, a short-term borrowing of some cash if depending on what's happening in the future. So we want to make sure we look at a long-term plan when we're looking at your needs.
Andrew, could I interject something
Yeah.
for the benefit of council since you're all new, the majority of you? So historically, the municipal advisor has been contracted through the auditor's office, works directly with the city auditor in terms of everything from like all these things that we're talking about, but also even preparing the information, the books and the presentations that we do to the rating agencies to make sure that that conversation is very precise and very cautious to pull off the best bond rating that we can. I've been through, I don't know, I think two of them since I've been here. We've done both types of sales that he's talked about here, both negotiated and just put them out on market competitive bid. And it happens. It's really interesting because there's even been a situation where when I was selling our debt in order to get us working with the municipal advisor as well as bond counsel, where I actually was in the trading room and we were deciding down to the minute whether or not we were willing to accept the bid or whether we were going to push it to, and we ended up saving, I think in that case, maybe 3 or 4 more basis points. So over the long term, that was a big deal. And the next thing that'll end up happening that fits in this here is we'll need to work with Andrew's group to determine if there's value in calling bonds that we have sitting out there, because we can call those implied and share. And that's a mathematical decision that you'll have to make. I think the last time we calculated the savings, it was about $450,000 in city interest payments over the life of the bonds that were remaining. And sorry to interrupt, but
No, it's good.
Council knows. Yeah.
One last thing is sort of a catch-all, and is that we bring to the table is sort of our experience across the state relative to, what we see in other areas, from development work, new and innovative things that are being put in place when it comes to development, things of that nature. I spent a lot of time on the development side, but we bring that to the table as well. So next slide. Some of the stuff we talked about already, but I think you're going to get copies of this. So I'm not going to dive into this too much, but I spoke about this earlier with the SEC and sort of what they are really concerned about. Conflicts of disclosure, dual rules when they talk about that being the advisor and the underwriter. And really, I think the last one is probably the value add, and that's just you're adding a set of eyes to the table, especially on pricing day that you don't really have the expertise or the knowledge with, and we're seeing it day in and day out. We're pricing probably 2 deals on average a week. So we're in the market, we're seeing what's happening, and we have a guy actually just dedicated to doing it. He loves it's all he lives for is the rates and what's going on and structuring differences that might benefit you the day of pricing. We've seen this happen before where underwriters will come in and want to push a certain structure. It's beneficial to them, but not beneficial to you. And so that's what we're on the pricing day, really the major value add for you on that front. Okay, this is just really sort of a visual. Some folks like visuals, but in terms of you can see in terms of the process, the underwriter, we talk about these terms, or the banker, they're really the connection to the investing world. And if you think about it, the underwriter, the investor's goal is to get higher rates. Our goal on this side with you as the issuer is to make sure it's priced the right way and structured the right way so that you're getting the best execution possible. And it just gives you a visual there of sort of the boxes and where they all stand. The other one that's also involved here is bond counsel, and you'll hear of them a lot. Bricker and Eckler, actually Bricker Graydon now, he's talking like Bricker Graydon White, I think. They keep on merging, but they're another one that's been a long-term relationship with the city to help you all out. And we work together, side by side. We do have different roles, but they'll play a major part with all of us.
And just to kind of note that with the conversation around the Casto development agreements, Andrew, one of his colleagues, got on the phone with the auditor and myself and the law director and Bricker Graydon attorneys to kind of talk through, and they wrote then the development agreement and the ordinances that we would move forward if we move forward on that. So we have all those different aspects.
So bond counsel's lawyers. I mean, I guess they're lawyers, right?
Yes.
This is our legal team.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all they do is specialize in this.
Yeah. Thanks.
Sector.
And we picked Bricker and Grain so that you know when it was really Bricker, or like you said, because it wasn't, the county and us have different bond councils, because there are times where there can be competing interests there, and we don't want them to back out on our part. We want our council to be there at all times, and that's worked very well over the years.
So debt list is pretty easy. You guys don't have a whole lot of debt. I mean, this is your this is only general fund, general obligation type debt. Does not include your OPWC loans or any OWDA loans, other things like that, which is very small as well. So you're in a great position where it stands today. And as you can see there, as Jim mentioned, you know, the optional redemption, which is your first option to call it if you want or pay it off, is coming up in 26. Actually, you can do that 90 days prior to that date if you so choose. You know, I'm sure he'll be getting a lot of suggestions and requests from underwriters to say, hey, you should refinance this. It's a you know, a savings game in terms of the amount that we typically suggest, over 3 or 5% of the savings after cost of issuance.
What interest rate is this?
You know, I think they were out at 4.5, 5.
Yeah, I think that,
like
yeah, the pieces were around 4, so it's not insignificant. Yeah, and our overall debt when I came in 2011 was about 45 million. So we're in a wonderful shape.
And you know, flip ahead maybe. I think I have the slide in here. We'll talk about that in a second, but I'll show you maybe one more. So
Can we go back that last slide, please? So we have 3.2 million in debt.
Yeah.
And so if we bought it out, we just come out of the general fund.
whatever fund is paying for it. So some, even though it's a general obligation issuance, you might have different funds paying for it.
We pay debt service out of capital on the general obligation items, right? These ones are being paid out of capital.
I point to this slide because you can tell as you get to the end maturity of a bond issue, this is your interest component up here in that checkered area, and this is the principal. And you can see there's not much juice to be gotten out of refinancing probably, but the numbers will tell whether it makes a difference for you. The one thing to remember when you're issuing bonds is that you only get the option to refinance or pay off every holding, and the typical term on that is used to be 10 years with a penalty. Well, they got away from the penalty, and it was just 10 years, and we started pushing it a little bit more on pricing day to 8 years. We've done some at 7 and 5, but it really depends what the market's willing to accept for that day in the marketplace. But as of right now, you've got this one coming up, and you probably, if you do something with it, you won't be able to call it again. So just keep that in mind. Let's jump back to.
Are either of those water and sewer?
No.
So it's all general fund.
No, that's 236, the TIF, the widening out there, all those projects with the
Yeah, and those are all
And
listed.
then there's also the cube involved in it. One of the challenges we had too, is it's not all tax exempt. There was an issue because of the naming rights and whatnot, which you had declared. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, we worked with Berger. That was a nightmare fixing. We got it fixed. So we have both types out there.
Yeah, so in the capital plan document that's both online, if you want the full one, I know you guys have seen it, that shows in the capital plan each year at the very top, we have the debt that's being paid out of each fund. So those are just the ones coming out of capital. And then if you go farther down, we have the water and sewer. I think sewer is actually debt free right now.
Yeah.
Water has just a couple that are paid off. I think the last one might be in 2028.
So this is your credit rating, and to the far left are the higher best credit rating, and then to the right is the lower one. Once you get past Baa3 and BBB minus, you hit the junk category, which is BB category, and goes further on down. You're in great shape, given where you're at right now. I would tell you that most of the municipalities in the state probably are in the low, this range here. Or they're kind of that grouping category there, I would say. So, you've got a great credit rating at AA. It's an independent review, and I'm sure you probably got one from the last time you went through this, but it's basically a report card on not only the management, but the fiscal situation of the city and the policies you have in place, but also the demographics and things of that nature. So there's things you can't control. There's things you can control over a long period of time. but it's not just all the finances of the city. It's also size, valuation, other items like that go into your credit score. And they've gotten to the point, and John, I'm not sure if you've ever seen one of their scorecards before for the city.
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
Yeah, I use that. That there's two weaknesses in our rating that we get for the city. And it really, they flat out, Moody's has flat out said we're not moving up on these two things are in place. One is our average wage and real estate values here in the community. And those two are related. The more you pay people, the more your prices go up. And then the second is they feel the state of Ohio could at any time put the burden of pension problems back on municipalities, the other government entities, and Moody's in particular has pushed that really hard. But other than that, we get rated phenomenally, just about everything, including management of the city and the disclosures. So when I do your meetings, mid-year review, pre-budget, this meeting will go to that. This goes to improving our rating for just you as the legislative authority being informed. That's important to them as well. And that's scorecard.
Andrew, what's the difference in the interest rate we would get, like from a AAA to a A minus? I mean, is that how
AAA, well, if you think about these categories here, you know, probably 5 to 7 basis points. Is
from
generally
the bottom 5%?
No, by category here.
Okay. Okay.
Top to bottom, it gets pretty distinct. And you know, you start to also, you know, when you hit the AA category, you start to pick up new buyers that have specific criteria in terms of where they can invest. And you know, if you go down to the A level, you start to maybe lose some of those. And some of that may not even matter too, because when you go to the market, it may not be of the size that a certain investor may want. So it just sort of all depends. But you know, having that credit rating is obviously really good.
Well, what is the minimum size?
You know, we've done them at $2 million before.
So two's on the low end.
Yeah. It's
Rule of thumb, Dan, they said borrow as much as you can all at once. Or put it in notes.
That's a
in one big issue.
very good
It's going
point.
to cost
Yeah.
you just as much to issue 20 million as it is to issue 2
And that's why
So do short-term loans.
notes. Yeah, banks.
Okay.
Yeah, we can't
Bankers.
get loans per se, but we can issue notes. Yeah.
I'm sorry. What is the difference between a note and a loan?
A note is a 1 year, generally a 1 year or less instrument, and then a loan or a bond would be, you know, something more than 1 year. So it could go up to. It really depends on the useful life of the asset. They do a calculation.
Okay.
And so, you know, if it's a firehouse, you could go up to 30 years or even 40 years. If it's got, you know, equipment in it that's got different useful life, it might push that down.
Can you touch then a little bit on how you can do notes over time and then put them into one debt issuance?
So we just did this with the city of Hamilton. They had like 5 or 6 different purposes that they rolled together and over a 4 or 5 year period. It actually started when inflation was really high with interest rates. And so we said, hey, let's just play the game because we all believe the short-term curve was going to come down sooner, you know, over time. And so they kept on adding to their projects, and probably this fall they'll take those out into a long-term bond, but they combine them over time.
The best example I give you that damn city is we did 236, the real estate purchase along the right of way, the 236 road improvements. I think the water plant, they did a $3 million upgrade back in, I think 6. All those were rolled into notes. And then when we got up to, I think, about $11 million, then we had issued bonds.
So we can mix and match general fund stuff and water and sewer.
That's what bond council.
Generally, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So different colors of money we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've gone through that already and through that again. So, you know, I'm going to share with you one of the debt limitations here you have. There's really 3. When it comes to general obligation debt, there's 2. One is the direct debt that is based upon, these are all based upon your valuation of the city. And so up here, we got $1.1 billion of valuation. And so when it comes to the direct debt, it's about the total bonds that are outstanding. So it's a 5.5% calculation on the unvoted side. The reason I don't show it is because there's all kinds of different ways to exempt it off the direct debt. Like you could have a revenue pledge and it's exempted off. So it doesn't really hold a whole lot of water. This one, you cannot exempt anything off of it if you pledge the full faith and credit of the community to the bond issue. And it's a standard issue in Ohio. But it's based upon annual debt service. And so up here you see, your annual debt service is principal and interest, $513,000. That on an annual basis and your evaluation is 0.435 such mils. So the concept is this: under the state constitution currently, once they change it, you have the ability to levy 10 mils of tax on a parcel. And you share that with, on an annual basis, you share that with all the different municipalities. So in this case, let's just say Hancock County, Findlay, Allen Township, and school district, on an annual basis, they are collecting the 10 mils. And if you look on your tax bill, you'll see this, right? All shared up to 10 mils. The Budget Commission has the allocation process on it, but usually it stays consistent every year. That is on the revenue side. And so again, if you think about the state constitution says you can do that on your, without a vote of the people, it also applies to unvoted debt. And unvoted debt in a municipality in a location cannot exceed 10 mils. So the theory is, if everything would go bankrupt, the investors could come to you and say, hey, you have to levy a tax for these two entities up to that amount to pay us off. And it's within the 10 mil limitation. So you share this, it's not yours, it's first come, first serve. And so sometimes we've seen a township come along and say, we're going to do a bond issue and we're going to use up all the millage. It's up to the county auditor who controls this and does the calculation to make sure that doesn't happen, and they get bond counsel involved and figure out a different way to do it. But that is the 10 mil limitation impact. Some cities, charter cities, have an extra 5 mils. And with down here, we sort of just did a calculation for you to say, all right, theoretically, if you borrowed $20 million, it would chew up 1.1 mil off the 10 mil. You probably have more capacity than you need, obviously. There's also one more for revenue bonds and income tax bonds, and that's really a calculation based upon coverage ratios. And you have that with your water and sewer system. You'd have that on an income tax obligation too. So, but this is the 10 mil limitation.
Can you talk a little bit about with the Casto project and the revenue sharing development agreements, TIF revenue, how that works versus kind of?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak generally about TIF development deals. The development deals are typically Huber Heights, if you're familiar with that area, booming community. They just did a TIF revenue bond for a housing development. And it was, it's not an obligation of the city. They were the issuer because they're the tax exempt entity that could issue bonds. The only pledge to the investor was the revenues dedicated from the TIF, and there's a new community authority charge that pays off those bonds. That doesn't hit their obligations at all. So it's considered, a revenue obligation that doesn't impact their debt limitations. If it would default, it doesn't impact their credit rating because there's no obligation for the city to pay, with the exception of just transferring those revenues. That's it. That's how those deals are structured.
Can I share something else, Andrew, with the group? Now, again, historically, what we were talking about with some of your predecessors on council and what they do down in Columbus on a regular basis is you take your capital plan and you aggregate up a set of projects that you feel strongly you would issue debt for, and they're good projects. And then what they do is they take those projects in a package to the community. It says, this is the projects we're going to do, and to do that, we want to issue, in our case, let's say $10 million or $15 million in debt, and the community votes. And if they pass it, they do it. In Columbus, I was told, and I don't know if it's changed since they told me, it's passed every time but once when they did. The time before they did do what they said they were going to do. They let a project or two slip. But by doing that, you get two things. One, your new taxes on your community are voted, so they don't go against your number here. Two, your community's got buy-in for the projects you're working on. And three, that new revenue, that tax goes away when the debt service payments go away. So it makes it non-permanent. And it's a pretty interesting and neat way to approach debt from a community standpoint. I don't know if you see that other places besides Columbus.
They're really the only ones that do that.
Now, property tax?
Sorry.
Property tax that that bond, how,
No, they just go out to the community and say, we're gonna issue this debt, we're gonna issue
and how
50 million in debt.
it gets paid back through?
Through
Through
other
the assessment.
revenues.
Yeah,
Yeah, they don't ever levy the tax for the unvoted bond structure. It's a unique kind of setup, but what they do is they say, hey, we're gonna do $500 million of sewer work. Sewer systems want to pay it back. It's just a cheaper borrowing mechanism for them. Yeah.
One of the reasons
I
that,
still don't understand. How
yeah,
does it get paid back? I mean, you're saying other revenues. What does that mean?
So they put on there, hey, we're gonna do $500 million of improvements to the sewer system.
Okay.
So whatever that calculation would be for that $500 million would be, like I'm making it up, 3 mils on your tax bill. But they say we're not gonna levy the 3 mils because we're gonna pay for it through the sewer system.
Oh, okay, you just,
Yeah.
We're just doing a credit enhancement.
oh, okay,
yeah, it's a line item in your budget.
okay,
Yeah.
so sewer rates,
Yeah.
okay.
the reason that we have not done that is because we felt like we would want to go out to the community with things that they are going to see as larger direct benefit. We didn't feel that we were in a water, sewer, our core infrastructure items. We didn't feel like it was necessary to do kind of a capital campaign around it, for lack of a better term. So I think that as we look at some of these other opportunities, and if we wanted to do more like larger kind of community assets projects, like Dublin has this is not anything I am interested in doing, but they have like community wellness centers and like different things like that.
Yeah.
That I think those are the types of items that we would maybe look at doing something like that. So I think right now, the way we've been approaching, or how I've been kind of thinking about it, is when we're looking at doing any sort of one-off debt, or I shouldn't say one-off, but these littler debt issuances, my goal has been that they are directly tied to an economic development project that is really covering the debt service until the revenues generated by either the property tax or the income tax that's generated through it pretty much covers the debt service, and then it's not even counting against us. I think one of the big things that we are going to have to look at in the next, 5 and 10 years is that we have obviously really been leveraging our general fund budget as much as we really can. And are we missing out on projects and opportunities that are going to help our community attract more of those white collar jobs and be able to build more housing to help with those housing values that we then see more immediate community impact? Right. So like when we're talking to our teams, obviously every time I talk to them, they're like, Mayor, we're getting by, we're doing our good work, but we can only do it for so long without seeing an impact. So how do we start looking to get margin? Okay, I think those are your main slides, right?
Yeah, real quick, I'll fly through these just so you can see real quick. This is the sort of the New York Stock Exchange of interest rates that close every day, and this is the 20-year. They call it the 20-year bond buyer index. So it just gives you a snapshot of where things were back in probably those 2% interest rates for 30 years, how it spiked up, and now it's starting to come back down again. Here
Did we have discussions in 2021, 22?
Yeah, I went to the administration. I actually went to the administrations prior to that as well. We had another group dip there. You can see back in 16, 17, and said, if we were considering debt, we need to hustle in it while it's here now. But there was no debt being considered at all at that time, and our debt was coming down pretty swiftly. Like I said, it went down from 45 million in 2011 down to under 5 today.
Yeah.
So in terms of timing, the timing is not ideal for that chart.
Yeah.
But we considered it. Council wasn't interested. The administrations at the times weren't interested in it. And we really didn't have anything that we need. We were paying cash. And that's one of the things that makes us a strong player in the bond rating agencies, is that we pay cash for capital. We don't make it happen. There are communities that look at the capital plan, how much cash flow is coming in, how much can we borrow with that? And then they borrow all the money and they do it all on projects. They don't pay cash. They use debt. We don't do that.
So that's your spot rate. The next one is what we call the yield curve. Let me jump in. There we go. This is a good slide. It shows you where things have been. I think this is back to 1991, the range. So the gray bars is the lowest it's ever been. That's the highest it's been since 91. And then you have the average there in orange, and then the green is what it was as of close yesterday. this is out of whack a little bit now because last 2 days, the markets just got hammered. So rates have jumped back up again. So, but when people hear about interest rates and they think that, oh, we're at record highs, no, we're not. I mean, even if you take this back, 5 more years prior to this gray bar gets really even higher. So, still things are fine. The curve's starting to get normal again, because before it was just a Nike swoosh that kind of went up like that, in terms of, the next one is pretty drastic. I told you about some of those folks that were in 21 and 22 and then go to long-term bonds. They got a sticker shock the next year because they might have been paying 25 basis points for a 1-year note. The next year they're paying 3.25, 3.5. So we're starting to see that come down now again too. We're starting to keep on hitting new lows relative to where we've been going back to 03. But that was resulted in trying to get inflation in order and the short-term curve kicked up. So that's really it. Sorry if it went too long, but that's want to give you a little background on those 3 items there. Any questions?
You might want to talk a little, you touched on most of it. When I first met Andrew, the initial municipal advisor we had passed away, and he was a phenomenal manager. It's probably one of the best business in Ohio for time in business. And because of us not looking to issue debt, we weren't in a rush to find someone. But in finding Andrew, he is hired in my office. He's a fiduciary of the city as a whole, meaning he represents the entire city. He doesn't represent or work for the mayor or me or the law director. He's here, and what we hired it for primarily was a resource for you folks. So when an initiative comes to you, somebody wants to talk about the development agreement, somebody wants to talk about potentially issuing debt, somebody wants to talk about something that's financial in nature, long-term economic development, where we're going overall, he's a resource for you that's independent. And again, he's a fiduciary of the city as a whole. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but it's important that you guys understand that.
More really add to that, but it's sums up well.
You owe me $20.
So Andrew, I think just the other thing while I have some time and have you here, can you just talk a little bit about things since you've been working with us, maybe a couple of things that the city is doing well, things that you think we can improve upon, or things that we're missing out on? And I've really appreciated you sharing examples of other communities across the state. Would you mind just hitting on a couple of things that might be beneficial for this group just to start thinking on?
Yeah, when it comes to development, I think you're in the process now or have been setting up TIF districts to capture incremental revenue that could come your way and pay for other public infrastructure improvements. And so I think historically the city has been relying on CRAs to put in place to drive development, and that's worked. But in terms of that's a 1 to 8 or 10 or 15 year time frame, and then after that, the revenue or that value goes on to the tax ticket. A lot of communities will overlap a lot of these development tools and stack them up, and so they'll do CRAs and they'll do TIF districts. We've got a lot of communities that are starting to do new community authorities now and starting to apply a 5 mil charge to every new development that's coming into town. These are some booming cities that are doing this that deal with infrastructure improvements. But I think, you have now started looking at these tools and implementing them, and with the exception of the NCA, as a way to drive revenue to help you pay for other infrastructure improvements.
I wrote some information on that for this committee as well, so that we take a look at it. So,
I think that's one key aspect that you're starting to really catch on to and do what other communities are doing. Your debt load we talked about it, it's very low. So it puts you in a great position to be able to take advantage of either going to the market at some point in time. But it's not like your debt laden in any of your funds, water, sewer, irrigation. So it does give you the ability to be advantageous for projects. Redevelopment, we've done a lot of redevelopment work. Was at a council meeting last night where they are, it's 10 o'clock, where they're pushing redevelopment in their downtown and really putting a lot of money into it to kickstart it and get it going. There's some really good examples of communities across the state that have done that very well.
They were issuing debt for that.
Some of them are, yeah.
Like the last night, what were they?
Well, that was where a developer, ironically came into town and was, they couldn't get anybody else to do multifamily in their community. And so they had to go forward. It's an old cleanup site that they bought. And then, the discussion was either walk away from the deal or give the developer $1.5 million, $1.6 million to do the transaction. We're seeing a lot of that in Cincinnati. It's awfully strange, but we're also seeing a lot of single family, incentives to spur that development across the state. Where they're implementing CRAs and then doing a replacement charge, community reinvestment areas. So they're paying the taxes and then putting a replacement charge in to help pay for the public improvements. So they're not giving anybody a discount. They're trying to pull every tool they can and then layer in a TIF on top of it. And so the community reinvestment areas can get pretty controversial at the schools because you can do them for 100% for 15 years to abate the taxes, and that really is a kicker to the school district that changed that law like 5 years ago.
So a couple of things. One, so obviously at the end of last year, City Council updated our pre-94 CRA, and I'll do a whole education session on that or send you guys some material. The pre-94s have to be 100% abatement. That's kind of the easy part. On a pre-94, which the city does not currently have, if you go over and above 75%, you have to have school board approval, but you can do longer terms up to a 15-year. So one of the things that I will probably be bringing to you guys in the next couple of weeks or months, depending on just kind of timing of things, is looking at implementing a post-94 CRA. The second main difference between those is the pre-94, as long as people meet the criteria of the CRA, they get the abatement. Where a post-94, they have to negotiate in advance with the city what their abatement is going to be before they begin construction. So it gives us a lot more control. And so when we've been discussing this with Bricker, they said it is not unusual for communities to have both of them, and then developers kind of have the choice for us to be able to work with them. Personally, I really like the post-94 from the control aspect of being able to negotiate and better determine how that is being utilized. So don't be surprised by that. The other thing is Andrew's been talking about, residential, especially single family residential is something you guys are probably going to get tired of hearing me talk about. But one of the things is under CRA abatements, under our current CRA abatement, they do not qualify for single family residential. So one of the things that we've been talking about is how do we utilize some of our other tools to be able to do that. So that's one of the things that Andrew's been providing some recommendations on the new community authority. Appreciate the sharing. I think it's a really cool tool. One of the reasons I have not brought this forward over the last couple of years has been that it establishes an additional tax on properties, which I just was not a big fan of. But the second one is that it establishes a pseudo-governmental board that then oversees that. And I felt that there would be a pretty significant community pushback on diverting or giving a pseudo-governmental board or pretty much private investors decision-making authority over tax revenue, even though it is a new tax. I had some concerns on that. So I think we've seen it work in some places. I think it can be a tool, but it's something where I think I've had some hesitancy around it. So I think more information to follow.
BJ, if I might comment, overall, one of my concerns for this group as a finance committee, it's nice to see it go from appropriations back to finance. This is the way it was structured years ago. It worked very well. Is how do we, as your administrators, or how, in working with Andrew, do we get you guys to the point, if it's what you're interested in doing and talking about, even what should be incentivized? Do you want to incentivize industrial, commercial, single family apartments? Because you have limited resources. You've all seen the numbers in terms of where you're at with your general fund. And it's very, very important that in the early stages, you guys have that conversation so that your resources are directed in an overall manner that you want to see them directed. And then and if something's outside of that parameter, then we work with Andrew's group and bond counsel to say, then can this deal be structured so that it doesn't impact our ability to continue with our overall initiatives and doesn't fit in with where we're going? And as you all know, this community did a strategic plan, and there's some things there that we'll have to take into consideration. I think there. So I guess it's kind of a question and a comment, because I want to make sure I'm bringing information to you properly, so you guys can want to consider it the way you want to consider it.
So, to interject. I'm actually working on that right now, on a proposal to present to you guys that would kind of set up a framework for what type of incentives we're willing to utilize in a process around that. So that is something that I do plan to bring to the finance committee and working with economic development to understand what one the partnership with the state, what the state is providing versus what we would want to provide locally. Obviously, one of our business development tools, which I know I'm jumping sideways, is obviously our zoning structure that allows us right now with just the blanket abatement to be able to pretty much, those are our two largest safeguards on economic development. But I am working on something to bring to the finance committee on kind of a incentive framework so that there's Union County did a really nice plan. And I think a couple of you guys have seen that is an agreement between, like, pretty much city council has signed off on saying, like, hey, here are the things we want to incentivize. Here's like the different levers that can be pulled. And then the schools also say, hey, if you are within this framework of incentives, we will give you this, our authorization. So it helps take some of the politics out of the incentive packages as well, which has been one of the real advantages to the pre-94 CRA. Because they're not, private investors, when they're looking to make an investment, they don't necessarily want to deal with the politics of coming to a city council meeting and, having their name dragged through the mud online or whatever it may be. So as much as we can make it kind of clear cut is how I think it's going to best serve our community long term.
I think the important thing here for us as a committee to understand is that we need to do our research and make sure we understand what we're talking about. Make sure we understand the difference between TIFs and CRAs and kind of what Mr. Staschiak mentioned. We need to have ideas of our own on what we envision for the city, so that when the mayor presents her ideas or when Mr. Staschiak presents thoughts, we have an idea on how those are aligning to what we want to do as a council, so that we can kind of advise on what we're seeing to the rest of our peers, is my opinion on how we need to move forward with that. And before we get too far down that hole, I would like to take advantage of having Mr. Brossart here to help answer a few questions, if you're willing. As we approach this whole Castro development idea on the north end of town, looking at your last slides of where the market is at and where we're at debt-wise, do you have any information or advice or anything that you can provide us on whether or not this is a good time to maybe consider debt? Now as opposed to maybe 5 years ago, or now as opposed to waiting 5 years?
Do you have a way to go back in time?
35 years ago, no. Yeah, when it comes to, well, a lot of these are policy decisions, right? We've seen communities be willing to, with the proper security provisions in place, use their general obligation debt to do a project. I'm not suggesting that here, but I'll just let you know what some communities have done. When it comes, if it comes down in the traditional way of saying, hey, this deal needs to stand on the revenues that are generated from this side alone, then you're automatically looking at going to fixed rate bonds right away, because you want to make sure you cap your exposure. And there's ways of doing that, either through private placement products, or they're all really kind of private placements. It's a matter of who buys that private placement, because they're unrated at that point in time. But anyway, the advice would be, you don't want to mess around with it. You probably, and there's different buyers, because you're not going to find a buyer for a TIF revenue note. They just don't exist. But they do exist for a fixed rate going out 25 or 30 years.
And that's the way that the pro forma that I shared with you guys for the Castro project is a private placement debt structure. If I'm saying anything incorrect, where then the majority of it is covered by the revenues. And again, when we talked about the infrastructure side, Castro, they're really paying us for the land while also making sure that the infrastructure is moving forward. And then looking at the fact that the debt revenue, the revenues that we have expected from the development right now are just based off of the Castro build out and the hotel, while all of that other land also when we would work to get development agreements in place with them to help pay the debt service as well.
Are you waiting for us to make a decision on Casto?
Yes.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yes, so we need to know on Casto two main things. One, if we can proceed, the attorneys are prepared to put together the ordinance to move forward and the authorization on the development agreement, and then I can share the development agreement specifically with you all. So one, do we want to move forward? How do we want to handle that? And then two, it would be our recommendation, Jeremy. I won't lump Jeremy in, but we need to know if we're doing debt or cash, because obviously if we pay cash, that changes our entire capital plan, and we're ready to bring the capital plan to you guys in the next 2 weeks. But obviously if we have to completely rework it, then that would be a very different ballgame. So what I personally obviously brought to you guys at the last meeting was moving forward with the land acquisition as well as the debt for both land and the infrastructure side. The hotel development and Art Mardick, who is the other property owner up there, has $500,000 set aside to put towards the infrastructure investment. And then Casta then would also do the $140,000 a year, and I did print off that.
What is the hotel development?
The hotel on 99. It was approved a year and a half ago through City Planning Commission. That's those. It is a, I believe, Marriott branded extended stay.
And that's going on the north side of 99?
No,
So
that's on the south side, but
same,
in that
same piece
corner.
of property.
Yeah.
A couple hundred feet south of 99.
And so they've already broken ground in that plot of the area.
No, they have not begun.
On the north flank of where the hotel is?
No, off of that road right there north of Blanchard Valley.
That's Horizon Point. That is not Castro.
Okay, so that's part of the development there on the
I
west
believe
side.
so. I haven't been out there in the last couple of weeks, but I don't believe Castro. Anywhere.
I'm gonna interject here with some respect, all due respect. Numbers like this should be vetted through the auditor's office and working with the municipal advisor and council to make sure that they line up with the types of debt that we're considering for issuance with regard to any development. So you probably want to look at this as a whole. I know you sent me something. I don't know if this was included in it or not. That I haven't seen. We've only been back in a couple of days. But in looking at this agreement, sitting here as your fiscal officer, I want to frame it in a way that first, this council and this committee needs to ask itself, do we want to incentivize apartments first? Because this group said they can't do this deal unless you give them money. That it just doesn't fly. And they won't do it. They won't build those apartments. And the group that's looking to build them is not likely to hold on to those apartments. They're likely to flip them to another investor in the not too distant future. The second thing is, in looking at the ground they bought, if the auditor's side is right, and I don't want to be quoted on because they could be incorrect, but in a cursory look at that, it looked like the investment in that ground was about $2 million, give or take. Maybe it was more, but it doesn't look like it was more. So it looks like we would be subsidizing them the same amount that they paid for the land. So they would be in for nothing other than the cost of their improvements that's going to cash flow on their side, particularly if we give them the money. And then the third thing you have to consider and talk about, are you willing, when you're incentivizing somebody, to still pay for something that maybe in the transaction they might be willing to give you for free? In other words, how much of that land do we really need to pay for if they really do this transaction? So one of the things that I want to see happen when we approach these is that first council makes a determination of what's palatable in terms of what type of development, what type of incentives, and what type of end product you want, whether it be apartments, commercial, single family, as Andrew mentioned earlier. Then two, there should be a rough term sheet drafted out that you guys approve in concept. So if this falls in line with where you want to go, these are the terms that are acceptable to you if we go down this path. And these things are not acceptable. And then maybe there's some negotiating in between things that may or may not be acceptable depending on what a final agreement would look like. Then the third thing, as I understand it, is then you begin the administration begins to negotiate an agreement to see what they come up with. Once that agreement is negotiated and acceptable to all parties, then bond council drafts the paperwork forward. So I feel strongly that we have the cart in front of the horse here in terms of where council should be. But again, that's the pleasure of council, not for me. I just am looking at what's going on. I really want to see the question answered as to what you folks want to incentivize, rather than a one-off case by case that deplete our resources over time. And then we get something that really fits in with what we want would be beneficial for the city. We don't have the resources to do it without going out and doing any significant debt issuance. So that's my call. I want it to be planned and well planned. And I'll support whatever you decide. I don't want to say I'm against anything or for anything. I just think the process needs refined, and that's my hope.
So, sorry that we are going back and forth, but to provide a little context. So appreciate the auditor sharing his opinion on this matter. However, as the executive for the city of Findlay, I did not want to bring forward something that I was not comfortable with. So rather than bringing it and having a discussion on something that ultimately I wouldn't recommend to council, I felt that it was my responsibility as the administrator for the city to have a discussion, to get to a point that I was comfortable bringing it to you. And now you certainly can provide additional feedback and I can take that back to them to see. But there was no point in bringing you something that we could sit here and waste 3 months of our time. And I could say, you know what, I'm not comfortable with that. I have a responsibility to look at the whole picture. So that is why over the last 2 years, when Casto originally brought this up, we said, you know what, not the right time. We need to work through a couple things. We need to look at implementing the TIP district. And then end of last year is when I really finally got to a point where I felt like we had something to bring forward. We had the property owners on the same page to be able to get the infrastructure together. That's when I then talked to Andrew, the auditor, outside law director, the Bricker Graydon. Obviously, the timeline has now shifted because the auditor was out for his medical situation. So that is why it is this. I completely agree with having a broader conversation about investment, but investment doesn't stop for our timeline. So that's why we do need to have the conversation. I would note that these are market rate. The phase 1 is 54 townhomes with the garden apartments, 176 garden apartments. The phase 2 is then additional apartments. So a total of 374, but they are all market rate. Additionally, in the provisions of the agreement that Bricker Graydon had put together, it does have a full, I want to say, liability on the developer. So if they start this and something happens and they no longer are the owner or they don't follow through on the development, they are still responsible for paying our service payments and I forget the exact provisions, but making sure that the site is usable for a future user. I don't know the specifics of where the auditor is getting his numbers on the 2 million, but I can't speak to that. I could easily look, but I know that most of the properties up there are at 80,000 plus an acre. So I don't remember the specific acreage that they were developing on, but I know that they do cover multiple parcels. So that may be one of the factors.
We're told that the hospital paid 85,000 per acre.
Correct.
And so they're offering it to us at 58,000, I think, because it's got overhead power lines, we've got wetlands, so it's not fully buildable. So that's probably
You're saying the hospital's offering it back to us at 58?
Yeah, the Casto property around here. Yeah, but the hospital did buy their northern acres at 85,000 an acre. Yeah.
And that's not a question.
No.
So if I could get clarity on what it is that you have to present to the attorneys that you're looking for our guidance on.
I just need to know if you guys are comfortable with doing the debt issuance and if we want to buy the land. So
let's go back to Jim's first question. How do we feel about incentivizing apartment buildings? You know, so we need housing, preferably single family, but there's not a lot of developers putting in single family homes. It's just economically, it's very difficult to build a single family home. So this is probably the next best thing. I mean, I guess townhomes are
What was the number of your apartments?
So the total is 320 garden apartments, and I would just clarify. Also, I think it really depends on the type of apartment, right? There's definitely a market for apartments. We need more housing for individuals that don't have children in the home,
Yeah.
that want to downsize, that don't want maintenance. So market rate and upscale is really something I would not be bringing this if this was something below market, because I don't think that that makes sense. I do think that this is, especially the townhomes, we've seen those go very, very well with other developments in the community.
And they built those out by Birch Haven. I mean, they filled up immediately. That was a few years ago, but I mean, I think this would fill up immediately. I mean, I think there's a huge demand out there.
And I think I
The
mentioned,
developer will do very well, I'm sure.
I think I mentioned it at the prior meeting as well. There are kind of 3 developments that are kind of in the works right now related to multifamily housing that are a combination of apartments, condos, townhomes. Once those occur, I would really not, and I've been telling developers when they reach out, I don't really want any more multifamily for a while. Single family really is the focus. But I would say that we're not unusual. Every other community is seeing the same thing, just with the cost for single family residential is pretty cost prohibitive to build right now.
Just to get a full picture of this, if you know it, Jeremy, off the top of your head, what would be the ramifications for taking it out of capital besides the labor to rework the budget? What are we looking at?
So what you're gonna do is you're gonna be, I mean, you can pay cash out of that, but then it's gonna have a ripple effect for the next couple of years where you're gonna have to move equipment out, you're gonna have to kind of move some projects one prior year just because you gotta recover from that, say 800,000, you gotta recover for that year and kind of build that back up for a couple of years.
In your own opinion, how detrimental do you think that was catastrophic?
So I kind of looked at a couple of years. I could move up some projects that were like looking into, I had to move out to 28 or 29 and 30. I can move them up to 28, resurfacing towards the back end, more towards the year 7, 8, 9. I can start increasing that amount from 2.3, what I was originally to 2.4. So, you're going to have, we could do it, but it's just, you're just going to push some stuff out type things that where projects that we were looking at doing, like airport, doing some stuff would be like, well, we got to go one more year just to make sure we cover our debt.
And one of the things to note is I think I had shared kind of the distribution of cost. So if we do the land purchase and the infrastructure on capital, that's much more difficult because you're going to have the $1.2 million hit directly out of capital. On the infrastructure side, the distribution is like $700,000 to $800,000 that would be out of capital. The remaining funds for the totaling the 1.4 would be water and sewer and storm. So we would distribute that across the funds, but the majority of it would hit capital.
I'm hoping to kind of change you guys' thinking a little bit in the sense of how you get information and utilize the municipal advisors as a resource. I'm going to kind of blindside you here, Andrew, but can you comment a little bit about how other governmental entities, if you're okay with BJ, this is your committee, how other governmental entities approach the decision as to what they should be incentivizing, generally speaking?
I mean, it's all, I have to say it's all across the board. I mean, it's, we work in some communities who are, I mean, they're not going to incentivize housing. Other places feel that they have a need to do so. And sometimes I'm surprised at what comes about through the community and what they want to incentivize. I think that I said it all along through this whole process, it's a policy decision of city council whether they want to support something like this. Our role is to make sure it is lock solid in terms of protecting you relative to the bond issuance and however that's accomplished, whether it's you're using cash or financing. It's kind of hard to say. It really is because there's never a set expectation as to what you consistently when I see across the state. It's really community by community, and some say absolutely not. Others say Yep, no, we're willing to do this because of X, Y, and Z.
If we do this, does it set precedent for, I mean, like the next commercial apartment deal? Well, you did it for them, you gotta, is there a,
Depends how strong your will is, right? I mean, I've heard that before. Yeah, I can't say I've necessarily seen it actually come through. That you, hey, you did it for the last guy, you gotta do it for me. But politics is a strange thing too, right? I mean, that can play a part in it.
And I would just reiterate, one of the main reasons, really the whole reason that I'm looking at this area, it goes back to the complexity of the property layout. Right?
Site specific.
Yeah, it is very site specific in my opinion, right? Because the infrastructure is needing to go onto one property that then is going to create access to the other properties that, would partially be on the other property. So from my perspective, this is not at every one type of, we're setting a precedence because this is a really unique area.
And, one point I was gonna make, I'm not a big supporter of having a set policy for incentives. Because you come across different items and then you back yourself into a corner. So I don't think that's a good idea either. It's really, case by case as they come across, what is the need, why? You can dig into their numbers and see what the return is. Make sure that they're not, hitting you pretty hard. There's other ways to try to protect yourself down the road too, things that it's the property would real quick. Can you get those in a development grant? Kind of depends.
I feel like this is a fairly small amount of money when we're talking about taking it out of capital or even issuing a bond. And is this going to affect, I guess my question is with this amount of money that we're discussing, are we gonna run into an issue of how many times we go back to the well? If we do it for this development and then next year we have another development come across and we have to have the same conversation again, are we better off to keep the liquidation by going to the bond, or are we better off to just take it out of cash this time and then worry about bonds later?
I would tell you, I think that a lot of this depends how you go about it, right? Because if you decide to use your credit to support it, well, you're digging in your credit, right? And so you're limiting yourself in what you can do in the future. If you say, look, this has got to stand on its own, then you do 20 of them in the next 2 years if you wanted to. If the revenue stream was proven.
And that's why it's so important that the finance side is handled through my office, so that when you know the general terms that are acceptable to you, committee and council as a whole, and the mayor and her administration are comfortable with it, we put together, hey, this is the direction we thought it was going to go. This is what we plan on doing. Do the numbers support it? Does it really do what we thought it was going to do? Or is there an alternative that might be preferable for doing this? And ultimately, one of my goals is to make sure there is no obligation by the city at any point in time, whether that developer's there or not. We're sure we're whole in the beginning so that we retain capacity down the road.
So if I understand, we're looking at essentially $1.2 million, correct? Either coming out of capital in a cash payment, or we're looking at a $1.2 million investment via bond.
no, it's more than that.
So the debt issuance would be a larger amount if you move forward with the land and infrastructure. So that's question one. Do we want?
What were the numbers there?
That's what I'm asking what the numbers are. So it's 1.4 and 1.2 for a total of 2.6.
Correct.
Okay.
Plus then, yeah, I think they'll end up with like 2.75.
That's land and infrastructure.
Correct. Yeah, I think we had a little bit of buffer in there as well as the $50,000 for like the process.
And do you feel like that we still, if we don't do the land, it kills the deal? I mean, is that what they're still saying to you? Or?
That has been the conversation. I have not gone back to following this, but yes, that is really what they had said previously.
So in terms of like, okay, so we have this deal, but I mean, in terms of the rest of the year, I mean, later this year, I think when we get the capital plan here in the next couple of months for the water plant, we're probably going to go out this year. I don't know. I mean, I can issue debt to improve the water plant. Are we at that? I mean,
I don't think we're quite there on water because of the master plan still needs to be complete before we would do that. So probably early next year. But again, that's going to be water fund. So that.
But so if we did this short-term deal and combined them in later, I mean, does that make sense? Or-
Yeah, that's
We would look
gonna
at
be
it.
up to
We would
bond
look at all those
council.
options, particularly if you're considering debt for water and sewer. Is that something we want to do, and does it allow us to accomplish keeping us from being responsible for that issuance with regard to the development agreement?
So there are short-term products that will support that issue.
It depends. It really does depend. And Andrew can speak to that better than I could.
Certain products, so in order to combine these together, it has to be some sort of a backstop from the city, it's an obligation or an tax credit obligation. So I think what the auditor was saying is that, you really want to make sure that the credit enhancement side of it and making sure the developer pays no matter what, that those security provisions are in there. They're going to need to be in there when you do a revenue obligation. They need to carry over if you decide to combine this all together and do sewer or water and whatever else down the road.
And the second thing is, if you're looking at doing that, if you're going to issue debt, I have to have Brinker and be involved with Brinker and make sure that any legislation that comes to you doesn't come in from our normal path. It has to come from Brinker. They have to be involved. Andrew would be involved in helping review it and whatnot, so that we know whether you're rolling a note or issuing one single piece that's tiny but permanent. It allows us to do again long term what you plan to do. So we need to know everything up front.
And they've been involved in this process, so they're just waiting for the direction.
So as we start to get into a time crunch here, guys, I think I want to present to you all the question of, is this something we want to take to council? Is what we feel is a good idea for council to pursue financially and for the city? My feelings, just to throw it out there to get the conversation started, would be that if we pass on this deal, I feel like there's going to be plenty more moving forward, and the mayor will probably argue that point. But from the conversations that I've had, I don't think that if this one slips by, it's going to be done forever. So I guess my personal opinion on this would be that I would say that I'm not interested in the deal. But I'm open to your guys' comments or questions or anything else that we want to talk about before I start writing recommendations down.
I just have one question. Was this what we were talking about, the 21 acres for a park? Is
So,
that part of it?
yeah, so the 21 acres is this lower portion that would be available that the city would purchase from them. And that is going to be a green space. There are no specific park amenity aspects, but what it does allow for the development as a whole is, one, there has been some discussions in the future for a pedestrian bridge connector over I-75 into the Cube Recreation Facility that creates connectivity to these neighborhoods. Additionally, there has been discussions about other development in that area, so it allows us a road connector down into that neighborhood. It also allows these properties to be better developed because we can put some of the, I always say detention and retention improperly. So whichever one is necessary for stormwater detention, there is ability on that property as well. So in essence, by doing that, it allows us to have that green space connectivity, potential pedestrian bridge, and also help make these properties more developable.
But there's basically no payback for that 21 acres.
Except for that it is included in this TIF area, and that by investing in that, it makes these properties more marketable, which then when people develop those, then that creates more revenue to cover the costs.
But it's primarily for infrastructure, for stormwater infrastructure. There'd be a stormwater pond, right?
Potentially, the specific of what's needed there.
Okay, I guess. Oh, okay.
Yes, it all depends on how things develop, right? And the sheet flow of the area, but it is more of an infrastructure investment for that area than just green space, though it will be primarily green space.
I guess, BJ, I would go the opposite way in that I think we need housing, and I don't know how long. I mean, you say there's going to be other opportunities, but what if there's not? I mean, when do we get started fixing our housing problem? You know what I mean? Just kind of like, here's the deal. It's not super expensive. It'll pay for itself over time. Just think.
Any other thoughts or discussion?
May I just add, I know right now we've been talking about them being bundled. I don't know if it changes your opinion at all, if we don't do the land acquisition at all and just focus on the infrastructure. If that is a part of the barrier, I think that if you guys approve one and not the purchase, that's fine. That allows me to go back to the developer. That might give us some additional negotiating. It could kill the deal, but if that's what the authorization is, then that's the authorization. I'm just throwing that out as an option.
And you make a very good point there. To develop the infrastructure is certainly a step in the right direction. It says that we're very interested in making a deal. But perhaps maybe this deal with Casto that's presented to us isn't the one that I'm liking or we are liking. And I would probably be much more apt to have the conversation of supporting the utilities at a cash basis.
And the deal with, you'd rather have residential versus apartments? Or what part of the deal? Too small to what?
I guess maybe I feel we haven't explored our financial standings enough to see what else we can get out of this. Or maybe I just don't understand them fully. I'm always willing to admit that maybe I don't quite understand what's being fully proposed here.
Yeah, I don't know.
But from what I'm seeing here, I don't see, I feel we can do better on our return with pursuing a larger market. But by putting the utilities in, it shows that we're serious and that we really need to move, and maybe that's the route that we go on it. And I'm not arguing with you. We need the housing. I guess maybe I just feel like I don't know that we've done everything we can do to get back what we can get back from.
All right, let's hear from the others.
And we were gonna pay for infrastructure anyways, right? We're gonna pay the 1.4 in this deal anyways, right?
That was going to be a proposal when we established the TIF at the end of 2024. It was with the intention of doing the infrastructure and getting repaid through the TIF, recognizing again the complexity of this area wasn't going to be developed in the manner that we wanted it developed without us kind of stepping in.
Right. Historically, without an investment like this, where there's a return, special deal in place, the city has not put the infrastructure in for most developments.
Okay.
Correct. And that's why we said we need the TIF to regain that revenue. Recognizing that we had been talking to, the hotel had already been approved, Casto was already at the table.
And in most circumstances with utilities or the infrastructure being built by the developer, there's no incentive there. Here we're putting an incentive out there for people to utilize the land, which may get more people at the table.
Right.
So we're still incentivizing here.
How do you do that without owning the land? I don't understand.
The right way, right?
So that the property owner is dedicating the right of way to us so that we can put the infrastructure in.
Okay.
And then with the TIF on there, the tax increment financing district, as investment occurs, that revenue is redirected to the city to pay down and make additional investments in that area. So we can put it towards the debt that we're taking on or additional investments. And there's a statutorily defined list of things that we can use that for. Pretty broad overall, utilities,
Yeah, when you think
infrastructure.
of the infrastructure, it's not basically like, okay, you put a sewer, electrical out there, it's just out there. So if they develop, they're tapping into what we already have in place. We're not running things over here saying, oh, there'll be a house here eventually.
Would there be a road fee on this or recapture on the water sewer lines?
That would be, kind of.
Because that's an option for
as
you
well.
too. You can make sure that we recapture that cost for tap fees. Rotary
I don't
fees.
know how that would work without having.
In the development,
So,
in the development agreement, they do have to still pay all of their standard development fees. So they're not getting an exempt from that.
So essentially what we're looking at is going back to Casto with the idea that the development is on them. We will assist with the utilities and infrastructure. And then after we make that decision, if that's the way you guys want to move forward with it, they have the right to either refuse our proposal or deny it, correct?
Yeah, so the development themselves is no matter what going to be them. This is going to be extension of Midwest Cord and then a new roadway going up to 99. So that's all public, water lines public, sewers public. Road, everything's public within that right of way. Now, anything that they have to do on their site is still their site.
So what's the 1.2?
That's to extend the roadway.
The one.
Oh, 1.2 is, 1.2 is just that, but if we're talking just roadway, that's, no matter what, that's gonna be public roadway. We're gonna want that under, that's not gonna be private. All that's gonna be public.
So the 1.2 is basically us holding the additional property to do with it as we need to do with it later.
Correct.
And the 1.4 is the infrastructure to allow the development to move forward as an incentive to them. Learn more with every question.
It's all right. I know what you.
So later on, that property might be more expensive or
And I can
less.
bring the presentation
As it,
up from her.
as it becomes, as that area develops, price could go up. I mean, you don't know. What do you guys think? You and Dan?
I'm more on the side of the infrastructure. It's get a better deal.
Or better. It sounds to me like I was incorrect in my speaking. And that they have that land to develop, and that's not the land we're purchasing. The land we're purchasing would be for future things, which means we're gonna have plenty of time to seek any deals, but it's not gonna be for that because we've got to do other things with it. So with that part of it already being done, I guess now the question is how much do we want to incentivize them? I mean, honestly, I think we need to capture that land if that's what that's about, is that additional acreage there with the green space that we can do drainage ponds and fix any things that may arise. You're better off to have the land and not do anything with it and sell it later than to not retain it.
And I would reiterate that the value, the 1.2 is based off of the appraised value of it, recognizing the limitations of development. But
Does this land connect to Hillcrest?
yes, it does about Hillcrest, correct?
So that could help that development also. So as Hillcrest develops, this land will become more valuable, I think.
As that entire area, I mean, with the new overpass and everything else, you're gonna see development, and that's why I think you gotta have the land while you can get the land. So I'll throw it out there as I've got to stick it here for a recommendation to council.
Can I ask
Yeah.
one thing? So looking at this cash flow, so in the first year it's positive 500, and then it's like,
I don't think you should use these numbers.
well, just for plus or minus, Joe, but okay. So if it costs us 192 grand, 180. So how does that where does that hit his capital? Or where does this number hit the capital?
We'll probably just do out of capital.
Okay, it comes out of capital. Okay, so all right, I understand, Jim. Then just for talking.
Yeah, and
purposes.
those numbers are from just the analysis that
Yeah, I
has been run by
understand.
Andrew, that recommendation, and that 500,000 is the funds from the hotel developer and that adjacent landowner that have money set aside to give to the city for the infrastructure development.
All right, so step one of this recommendation, since we need to move forward with something before we have to adjourn here and go to our next meeting. I'm looking at a recommendation that we move forward with both stems of this, of taking it to the attorney to form an ordinance to move forward with both the incentive of doing the infrastructure and utilities as well as purchase of the additional land, which would be part of the phase 2 development that would not, at this time, as I understand it, involve Casta.
Yep, that would be city-owned property.
I'll second.
For clarifications, the piece you're buying is just gonna be apartment, right? It's not gonna be developed, it's sold. That's the proposal on the table. I want to make sure, because that affects
Just the part.
As she just said, it does not involve Casta and does not currently have any retail.
But we're not buying it with the intention of flipping it aside. We're buying it with the intention of retaining it as a park. Or
At this point.
A park or just infrastructure. Could be.
that's what I'm asking.
It could be just a big set on, or something.
Use is important with regard to what I have to do.
Pardon?
Use is important with regard to.
It will not be developed for commercial purpose. It can be utilized for infrastructure and recreation space.
He's saying, Dan, for his purposes, he needs to know what we're planning to use it for so that he knows how to code it on his end. All right, so clear as mud recommendation to council. I am recommending that we move forward with forming an ordinance to, one, provide infrastructure to this area which will affect the development. And two, we are also moving forward with the purchase of the land with the intention of leaving it kind of as is, as a green space for future utility or infrastructure needs.
Or park.
Or park.
And I seconded that.
Well, I would.
Do we need to differentiate between a park or
No, I
future?
just that the financial piece will be brought to from the auditor's office and working with the director and the municipal advisor as part of your final package.
Okay.
So before you to go through the ordinance, so we don't just leave something hanging out there. We make sure you see exactly what the numbers are and exactly what we're going to do. But
Right. They're making a motion to move forward with both of them. You're gonna have the finance piece on there for council votes.
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, let's make sure we do.
Your office will be involved before council.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, that's our role.
Yes. All right, so that's recommendation number one. I am voting in favor, aye, for motion number one.
Aye.
Mr. DeArmond is an aye. Mr. Phillips. Aye. Mr. Needles and Mr. DeLong.
Aye.
All right, we are all in ayes. Recommendation number two that I am moving forward to recommend to council is whether to send this off in a bond request that would go through the auditor's office with the advisement of all parties involved, or whether we pay this in cash up front out of the capital campaign housing adjustments. My recommendation moving forward is going to be that we pay cash and not move it to a bond issue. Any discussion on that recommendation before we take it to a vote?
I would vote no, only because I think it's gonna be so disruptive to the capital. So I would rather see it put out like a 1-year interim and let's see what happens to the waterfront. We might have other deals we want to package. I don't know, so I would, but I think it's just be disruptive to, because you have about $7 million in your capital, plus or minus, right? So if you take a third of it, now you're saying this, we're gonna take a third of our capital, we're gonna say this is the priority over all the stuff we've been planning for 10 years. I don't think that's right. So if you took the 183, I think we said it was 5% or something, right? Or what, so if you have, what's it gonna cost? 7 million, so 10% would be 700 grand.
Well, hey, Dan,
5%.
he made a motion. Is there a second on his
Okay,
motion?
I'm sorry. It's a motion. Okay, sorry.
If I made a motion, I withdraw it. I was
Okay.
barely opening discussion.
Okay.
And I apologize that it came out because Dan just said.
All right.
So I will draw any motion I might have
Okay.
unintentionally made.
We're just discussing.
Yeah.
So
I think we need to pull this over to our municipal advisor.
I was
Tell him
pointing
what he needs. Yeah. Sorry to.
Well, I mean, I appreciate that, but I mean, I think it's more of a holistic approach of what else you need down the road in the rest of the year, besides just right now. I mean, again, the options are doing a revenue bond obligation. You're out the door right now, it's done. The other option is cash. I would tell you, if you decide to use cash, you're gonna want to pass a reimbursement resolution that gives you the ability to issue bonds later. The financing tax exempt up to 2 years later from the date it was spent. The other option is to secure the daylights out of this thing and do it as that other greater, what they call various purpose obligation of the city. So those are really your options. And I'm not here to tell you one's better than the other. I mean, some of them are better in terms of interest rate wise, right? And we can walk through those, but those are really sort of the options that are on the table. And just want to make sure you do the cash option. You have the ability to come back later to pass that reimbursement resolution.
Can you explain the third option again?
So if you have, we call them various purpose obligations, and you kind of package them as one financing to the public. I'm making it up later on. You've got $5 million worth of projects later in the year you want to do. You can combine that with this as an option. Now, understanding you're using city credit to finance this project, there's no right or wrong reason about it, but we also want to make sure that through the development agreement that the protections are there to make sure. One of them that we sort of briefly went over is what they call a minimum service payment obligation. And it's the obligation of the developer or the owner of the property to pay the higher of debt service or the taxes. And so you make sure that you're covered and the bonds are covered, you're not coming out of pocket. It's got the same security provisions as a tax lien. So that's important to be up in front of any mortgage on the property to be paid first in the event of a default.
And you're talking about how much, 1.6 to borrow, or how much are you talking about?
2.6.
2.75.
Yeah, it's gonna be expensive to issue this.
Well, that 2.75 includes the $50,000 fee that you had to calculate it, or kind of
Yeah.
placeholder.
So as a geo issue, yes, if it's a revenue bond issue, we're 3 or 4 times that. And the interest rate increases. So there's a difference here in terms of what we're talking about, either revenue bond obligation, that was a geo obligation. So things change drastically when you look at these different options, just to make sure
And I prefer not CGO in this case, so see us.
There's too many variables here to decide right now. It's like,
Yeah, so I think you guys giving us the recommendation helps. I think we will get together and bring back the financing or cash options. I don't think you guys have enough information to make that.
Sure.
But I will
There's two.
probably be recommending the financing option from a cash on hand, being able to move forward with our projects, because that would, especially given that we are moving forward with the land, that increases that dollar amount. That's no longer just an $800,000 hit to the capital fund. That's, a $2 million hit. So that changes things a lot further. So we will work to get that with the auditor back.
so you have enough from us tonight then?
Yes, this is helpful. We will, what we will probably do, just so you guys are aware, we will be reaching out to get the capital plan meeting scheduled to review that regardless as we work through this. We will plan it, we'll decide how we want to present that, but then we'll have to work through, once you guys approve the plan, depending on how you finance, then we'll have to just manage it throughout the year to adjust accordingly. But
One thing I would like to provide them as we move forward, this may not be a recommendation, but are we as a committee leaning one way or the other so that they can focus their energies in one direction as opposed to the other to kind of provide us more options?
Cash versus debt.
Yes.
Like, is cash versus debt?
Like, what are your, I mean, obviously your initial feelings are maybe take this to a debt. He's leaning the other direction. I'm leaning the other. Can we, and maybe the answer is no, we can't at this time. Can we provide them any guidance on which way we're leaning so that they have that information to move forward with?
I would be more leaning towards that. We use the term incentivize, which when you're taking dollars away from streets and projects that improve existing structures in people's lives, it seems like more of an incentive than typically we would need. It has more, to me, it has more impact to the public and their perception of it. And the other reason is there's no guarantee that we're going to stay at 80-20 for that. If we make an adjustment there, then all of those projects are pushed out even farther and farther and farther. So that would be why it seems like it does have awful big impact on capital based on what we know, and then you factor in what we don't know. I'm towards that.
Comment to that?
Give me 1 second.
Absolutely.
Any thoughts?
I like number 2 option where you're saying you started with. Also, I want to see what we can do with cash. I just want to see what, I'm not trying to make your job harder or your job harder, but I want to see what we can do without trying to make too much of an impact, like Ryan was saying on the city itself, but also, let's say we do cash for however long we feel necessary or smart, right? And if we can switch it over, then, we may get a better rate at that time. If we feel great with our cash option and we're moving right along, we're like, oh, it's not taking really much away from our infrastructure within our own city, then maybe, but if we have the option at some point to then change our minds, I mean, to me, that's best of both worlds. And, that just seems logical. And I think, this is personal opinion, I think rates are going to go down, and it almost gives us time without making the knee-jerk reaction to go debt, even though a couple of points isn't going to be the end of the world. If we did buy it, if we were high, just drop a couple points, and then we're like, well, we're kind of pushing our cash. Now we want to see our cash go other ways. You know, we have the option to kind of bounce out of that.
Mr. Long, thoughts?
I kind of like the idea of the debt and I don't think there's any charge if you could prepay it, is there?
Depends.
There is a charge that could be prepay it.
It's gotta be.
Or the inability to
palatable.
prepay. Or the inability to prepay.
One of the other things to think too is depending on the rate, and we should be able to get pretty favorable rates, is keeping our money invested, 4 or 5% and being able to.
Yes.
But it's not huge differences, but
But the idea.
That's what I mean.
yeah,
Mr. Staschiak.
My question is, since the development agreement still is somewhat in flux, what about a 2, 3, or 4 payment option with them? Give you a half over 2 years.
so they were open to us paying over time when then had the conversation about the debt. Then that wasn't as big of a conversation at this point in time, but they were open to us paying for the land in a 2-year period.
Mr. Brossart, any concerns with anything you've heard or any final thoughts you may have for us to consider?
No.
Mayor, any final thoughts?
No, I appreciate the discussion. Very helpful.
Okay, we have our one recommendation that we're gonna move forward to council with. I think we have a lot to consider from the debt cash standpoint. Our next meeting will be on the first Tuesday of April, which I don't have a date in front of me, but same bad time, same bad place.
Can we actually do a meeting in 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago?
I take it you need that to move fast.
We would like to move sooner than later, yes.
Sure. Same, like right before the
Yeah.
meeting? Yeah.
So Tuesday.
Yeah.
March 17th, St. Patrick's Day.
You can with me.
Cutting into our fun.
I know, sorry, but you have to come to council regardless. So honestly, I'm just giving you a little time to pull it together.
We have, you can't be here.
I'm waiting.
Okay, so we have 3 out of the 5 of us that aren't gonna be present on that date,
So
which is gonna be
you're
a
not-
problem. I'm not gonna be able to be
No.
here.
You guys aren't gonna be at council
You're not
either.
here?
I will be at council. I unfortunately have problems at 4 o'clock.
Okay, well then we will get some other
Who's the
options
three?
that work for us and send it to you guys.
Read Dan and myself.
Oh, you're, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
Okay, we'll look at some other dates.
You can't make
That's
it?
the
Not
thing.
No, he's not saying that.
No, I'm not saying
Oh, I thought you sound good. Okay.
Are you, so you can't? Okay, well, okay.
I mean, so even what we could do is like, I'll send around or do a first appropriation where it's first capital, you guys want to approve it. It will go through 3 readings. So at least it gets its readings. We're not lagging behind on that. I mean, it's like police vehicles, stuff that we do yearly on that kind of stuff. It won't be anything that's off the wall. It's something that's always been in the plan. So that way I can keep moving forward. Cause then the more we keep moving out, stuff gets expensive. So I want to make sure we can keep moving on it.
So you're saying,
So if we need to move it at council, the next council, it will still have a reading. So if that doesn't
Reed, are
work.
you available earlier in the day or any of you available earlier in that day on Tuesday?
I'm available.
You said you're not. 11 a.m., 10 a.m.
Yeah.
I mean, throw something out there that might work for you. Are you available
I'll make myself available.
Tuesday the 17th earlier in the day?
Yep.
As opposed to 4 o'clock?
I have to check my therapist schedule, but I think
Okay. How much notice do we have to give them in a public meeting?
24 hours.
Okay, so let's shoot for the 17th before noon. If you can just verify, please, what your availability is, and I'll put a time out there. And we'll try to get together earlier in that day on the 17th to get the whole conversation handled on debt issuance versus cash.
Just confirm it.
I will confirm a specific time when I hear back from the auditor.
Sounds good.
All right, motion to adjourn.
Second.
We don't have to do that motion.
Dan, we don't. Do you like it? Good. We can take that to the rules committee.
That's just Robert rules. I don't think you actually have to have a, the chair can just adjourn.